Welcome to today's webinar covering the topic Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. My name is Severin Freund. I am System Administrator working at Nomasis. The question I want to ask you today is, how much security is enough security? It's actually a trick question. I just ask it to get your attention. When it comes to security, you can never be secure. You can only be more secure. Even with the most expensive cybersecurity tools and a dedicated team behind them. At the same time, there are so many different cybersecurity products, even from a single vendor like Microsoft, that it can be difficult to understand what you're getting into when you buy certain products or packages. As Microsoft recently decided to rename and consolidate a series of their security products, I want to give you an overview today about the Microsoft 365 Defender suite with a focus on the Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. Let's get into it. To the agenda, we will find out what Microsoft 365 Defender actually is and what products it consists of. We'll be talking about the Defender for Identity, Defender for Office 365, and as the title of this webinar suggests, Defender for Endpoint. For this product, I will focus on the operating systems it can run on and some of the key features it provides. We will have a look at the Microsoft 365 Security Center, which consolidates the majority of Microsoft security products into one user-friendly platform. After that, we will have a look at the licenses needed to run the Defender suite and the Endpoint Defender. Last but not least, why should you use Defender for Endpoint anyways? The first change I want to cover is the Microsoft Threat Protection is now called Microsoft 365 Defender. We used to have a series of products that has now been consolidated into one powerful security suite. Azure Advanced Threat Protection, or Azure ATP, has been renamed to Microsoft Defender for Identity. It's a cloud-based solution for your on-premise Azure Active Directory used to identify threats and compromised identities. The formerly known Microsoft Defender Advanced Threat Protection was renamed to Microsoft Defender for Endpoints. As the name suggests, it is used to detect and handle attacks on your endpoint devices, regardless of the operating system or the manufacturer. And finally, the Office 365 Threat Protection has become Microsoft Defender for Office 365. It's basically designed to protect Office 365 applications from malicious links, phishing attacks, and similar attacks. Together, they form the Microsoft 365 Defender solution. You can still use all of those products independently, but they still work better if used together. Of course, there are other Microsoft products providing advanced security like the Azure Defender Suite or Microsoft Cloud App Security, which I will not cover in today's webinar. So Microsoft Defender for Identity. For security admins, it's often hard to detect advanced attacks in a hybrid environment. Azure ATP, or new Defender for Identity, is the solution that helps. It can detect and identify suspicious user and device activities and has kind of a learning-based analytics. It lets you protect user identities and credentials that are stored in Active Directory. You can use it to investigate advanced threats, compromised identities, and malicious insider actions against the company. Defender for Identity also enables your admins to find threats easier in a hybrid environment. So the Defender for Identity helps the admin to identify configuration gaps, and it can be used to follow the Microsoft recommendations easier to prevent attacks in the future. To detect any kind of malicious activity, you can use the real-time analytics and data intelligence, which can be used to prioritize and map threats in Defender for Identity. New insight and threats that you need to be aware of are automatically delivered from the cloud, so you have an easier way to benefit and act quickly if a threat becomes obvious. You can also investigate the users that are most at risk in your organization. This is done based on a security score and observations of risky behavior on the end user's behalf, and also the number of previous incidents and attacks against this. Then there's also the future for advanced threat hunting in Defender for Identity. So you can detect the threats early on, and it also allows you to take automatic actions against those threats. So Microsoft Defender for Identity is especially useful in hybrid environments, and it's a powerful tool to safeguard your on-premise Active Directory. Microsoft Defender for Office 365. It was formerly called Office 365 ATP. The product is basically designed to help to protect your organization from malicious attacks in Office 365. For example, it's done by scanning email attachments for malware or scanning URLs in emails and documents and checking for unauthorized spoofing. My personal favorite feature in Microsoft Defender for Office 365 is the Safe Link feature. It helps you to easier deal with the different phishing links that you receive almost on a day-to-day basis. Then there's a reliable filtering function, and it prevents attacks on small and large audiences, as well as targeted attacks to one user. For example, like an email that is compromised or credentials, also ransomware and the really advanced malware. Then we have a Microsoft AI that detects dangerous and suspicious content. It can be links, files, executables, and it then finds an attack pattern in them. That also makes it possible to detect attackers that are proactively trying to get around your measures that are already in place. It also provides threat detection, prioritization, and investigation, where it can track down attackers in the whole Office 365 environment. Then to the response and remediation, there's an automated incident response solution, and it allows your team to be more efficient as lots of threats are actually dealt with automatically, from the identifying to remediation. And one of the most important things is to basically raise user awareness. That can be done through hands-on simulations or training. The Defender for Office 365 also adds security-related features to the client, like Outlook, and you can use those to challenge your employees every now and then to raise awareness for phishing attacks, for example. You can send them phishing emails, and if they react the right way, they will actually be told, yeah, that's fine, good, you have found the threat or the phishing email. And also, you can have your security posture leveled up by templates that are given by Microsoft. So you can strengthen the security in long term and find gaps in the configuration to run a secure Office 365 environment. Now, next one, Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. It was actually called Microsoft Defender ATP in the past. This product helps you to detect and also act against attacks on your endpoints, of course. It supports Windows operating systems from Windows 10 to Windows Server 2019. And it can also be used on Android, Mac OS, and Linux, which is currently in preview. And in addition to the name change, Microsoft actually introduced to support iOS devices as well, which is also in preview currently. The threat landscape on mobile devices is kind of unique. You have a large amount of different manufacturers and operating systems, and the biggest threat on mobile devices are normally phishing attacks, and many of them also occur outside of emails, such as like messaging apps, SMS, or just websites, phishing websites, or also other apps. And this makes it even more challenging for the user to interact with the mobile device. Like if you have smaller screens combined with the touch input and gestures, it creates an ideal situation for the user to accidentally touch or scroll or just open a link that could be malicious. So it's much harder to tell also if the URL you're seeing on a mobile device is a potential phishing site. And it's harder for users to check a link if it's malicious than if you would do that on a desktop computer. So it's actually much easier on a mobile device to be a victim of a phishing attack. And therefore, we can use Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. Now, it can actually help in large varieties of ways. You see here all the features the Defender for Endpoint gives you. That is, for example, the block at first sight. So that means when Defender for Endpoints encounters a suspicious or undetected file, it searches the Microsoft Cloud backend, and it also has a direct analysis of the file to determine whether that file is malicious or not. And Microsoft has a large backend or database where they can do that. We also have a web content filtering, which enables your company to track and regulate access to websites on a really advanced level. You can use content categories, for example. And many of these websites are not even malicious. They might just be problematic because of compliance regulations, bandwidth usages, or other concerns, of course. Or we have the evaluation lab, where you can be used to stage end-to-end attacks, to see the Defender for Endpoint capabilities in action. It lets you monitor the prevention, detection, and remediation features in action. And we have the feature Microsoft Threat Experts. There you can engage with a Microsoft security expert directly and have a quick threat analysis on a threat that you're seeing, and they can provide you more insights that are needed to understand the complexity of a threat that affects your company at this point. Now, the three of the main capabilities of the Defender for Endpoint are threat and vulnerability management, attack surface reduction, and automated investigation and remediation. Threat and vulnerability management, that lets you discover vulnerabilities, of course, and misconfigurations in real time. So you don't need to have an agent or have scheduled vulnerability scans. It includes like real-time discovery, where the devices automatically report and push vulnerability data to the dashboard. And it also detects the organization's software inventory, like installations, uninstallations, or patches that are done to the apps. And that lets you quickly find new vulnerabilities, also in Microsoft apps or third-party applications. The attack surface of an organization are all places where an attacker could compromise your environment. This often comes down to end user devices and your network. And Microsoft Defender for Endpoint lets you configure rules to challenge, for example, launching executables or suspicious scripts that are downloaded, and also for behaviors of an app that are not usual. Then we have the automated investigation that can either be started automatically if a device alert occurs or manually by an admin. While this investigation is active, the device is monitored and other devices with similar alerts are gathered together. If there's more than 10 devices, actually an administrator needs to agree on this expansion so there are more devices can be found and the remediation action can be done. If it's less than 10 devices impacted, Defender for Endpoint can actually directly take action against this threat. And normally it would automatically like quarantine files or isolate a device and stop services if needed. So what is the onboarding process for the Defender for Endpoint? Of course, your devices must be configured with Defender for Endpoint services first, and they need to retrieve sensor data. And there's several different methods to do that. This can be done by a local script on the Windows device, by group policies, or the easiest way probably by mobile device management like Intune. You can also use Microsoft Endpoint Configuration Manager or VDI scripts. Now, the Defender for Endpoint also has support for Windows servers. It provides advanced attack detection and investigation through Windows Server 2008 to 2019, and also the semi-annual channel from V1803 and above. Now, Microsoft Defender for Endpoint on Mac OS provides an antivirus and endpoint detection and response, the EDR capabilities for the 3 most recent releases of Mac OS. It can be deployed and managed through the Endpoint Manager and Jamf. Just like with the Microsoft Office applications on Mac OS, updates for the Defender for Endpoint on Mac are managed through Microsoft Auto Update. You can also configure Mac OS Defender for Endpoint via a manual deployment script, but normally I think you would choose to take Intune for that. Now on Linux, you have the same possibility. You can provide antivirus capabilities, and it includes a command line feature to configure and manage the agent. You can initiate scans and manage threats that way. Microsoft currently supports the most popular Linux distributions like CentOS, Ubuntu, Debian, or Oracle Linux, and some more. Can be deployed and configured using Puppet or Ansible, or with some other existing configuration management tool for Linux. Now, on Android, you can use Defender for Endpoint on devices with Android 6 and above, both on Android Enterprise, Work Profile, and on older devices still using Device Administrator mode. On Android, it offers web protection with anti-phishing, blocking unsafe connections, and setting custom indicators. It scans for malware and potentially unwanted applications and provides additional prevention capabilities with Microsoft Endpoint Manager and conditional access. Now, those indicators are actually called indicators of compromised, are an essential feature in Defender for Endpoint. It gives you the possibility to set a list of indicators for detection and blocking. So you can set indicators currently based on files, IP addresses, URLs, or domains or certificates. Now on iOS, which is still in preview at the moment, it can be used for devices running iOS 11 and above. And this works both on supervised and unsupervised devices. And on iOS, like on Android, the features are the web protection with anti-phishing, unsafe connections, and you can configure the custom indicators as well. So at the moment now, all the functionalities of Defender for Endpoint and Defender for Office 365 are now bundled together into the Microsoft 365 Security Center, and it enables you to manage your security solutions for identity and access management, threat protection, information protection, and security management. There you have like the visibility and control and to understand and act against threats that are in your organization. Microsoft Defender for Identity, on the other hand, is still managed over the Azure Advanced Threat Protection portal. Now to the licensing. If you already have the full Microsoft 365 E5 license or E5 security license, you can already make use of all the features that I mentioned earlier. On the right side, we have the Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, which can also be licensed in Windows 10 Enterprise E5 or just the Microsoft Defender for Endpoint license. In blue in the middle, you see the Defender for Identity, which of course can be licensed with E5 or E5 security, or just the Enterprise Mobility E5. And on the left-hand side, we have two different plans for Defender for Office 365, which we'll have a closer look in the next slide. And there's also some additional products if you have the E5 Microsoft 365 E5 license or E5 security license. That would be Application Guard for Office. So that's a protected mode that isolates untrusted documents, so they cannot access trusted corporate resources. Or, for example, safe documents. To keep you protected, safe documents will be sent to the Microsoft Defender for Endpoint Cloud for analysis. And if they're safe, you will actually get access to them. And also Microsoft Cloud App Security would be in the same licensing option and Azure AD Premium Plan 2. Now, if you have a Microsoft 365 Business Premium license, you can already make use of the Defender for Office Plan 1. It brings a series of interesting functionalities, especially safe attachments and safe links, plus anti-phishing. It enables you basically to configure a basic baseline security for O365 and which already protects better against the majority of threats nowadays. With the E5 licensing upgrade, with the Plan 2 that becomes available, you can also use threat trackers or the attack simulator, which can be used to run realistic attack scenarios in your organization and lets you identify vulnerable users before a real attack would take place for those. So why should we use Defender for Endpoint? As I already mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, it's not possible to have enough security. you can only have more. With the Microsoft 365 Defender Suite, it really lets you protect both the mobile devices as well as the Microsoft applications running on those devices a little bit better. Furthermore, the Defender for Endpoint also integrates very well with the Endpoint Manager or Intune, and which actually can be used to distribute Defender for Endpoint on Windows, Mac, iOS, and Android. Another reason to use Defender for Endpoint or licenses, if you already have subscription to the Microsoft E5 license or Microsoft 365 E5 security, you can already get started with all of the features in the Defender suite, or even with an Microsoft Windows 10 E5 license, you can already make use of the Defender for Endpoint.